Hare Krishna. So today we have our session number 21, and today we will cover three chapters. Chapters 7, 8, and 9 of the third canto. So today we have a lot of work to do. So first slide is about chapter 6. So Vidura asks about the nature of the soul and the Lord. So in chapter 6, uh, uh, in chapter 6, Maitreya described the process of creation from the point of view of the Lord, right? Explaining how the Lord participates in the process of creation, right? So although in reality, of course, the Lord never gets in contact with material energy, right? He remains aloof. Still, he participates in every step of the creation through his different energies. So, in the classical Indian systems of philosophy, two common ideas about the nature of the Lord are monism and dualism. So, monist philosophers they believe that everything is one, right? Everything is Brahman, and there is nothing apart from Brahman. So, in the philosophy of Sankaracharya, for example, it is said that the souls are just parts of Brahman that becomes covered by Maya, right? And once this illusory covering is removed, then we become again one, right? That's their idea. Dualist philosophers, they believe that there is a difference between Brahman and the individual souls, as well as between Brahman and the material energy, right? And they explain the existence of the material universe through the combination of these different forces. So in dualism, Brahma is not supreme because there are other forces that are separated and independent from him. So quite an interesting philosophy, right? However, all the Vaishnavacharyas, they disagreed with both monism and dualism. They said they're both wrong. And they accepted the idea that the Lord has multiple potencies that are simultaneously one and different from him, right? So, for example, the philosophy of Ramanujacharya is called Visistadvaita Vada, and it's translated as non-dualism with distinctions or purified monism, right? So you see, it's not dualism and it's not monism. There are some exceptions there to both sides. Then we have the philosophy of Madhvacharya that is called Suddha Dvaita Vada, purified dualism, right? So it starts from dualist philosophy, but with corrections and no, uh, I like with corrections, right? Is the real philosophy. Uh, then we have the philosophy of Vishnu Swami that is called Suddhadvaita Vada, purified monism. And then we have the philosophy of Nimbarka that is called Dvaita Dvaita Vada, monism and dualism, oneness and difference, right? And there are some differences in their presentations, but they all agree on the on the essential points, right? And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he offered the perfect explanations of these concepts in his Achintya Beda Beda Tattva philosophy, right? And so he explained that the Lord and his energies, they are inconceivably one and different at the same time. So therefore, although the Lord is involved in all steps of the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the universe, like through his different potencies, at the same time, he's transcendental, right? So both sides are reconciled. So because of these 2 points, they are simultaneously true. They can be quite difficult to understand, but we have difficulties with philosophies that reconcile different points that appear to be contradictory when it's not just black and white. So Vidura starts the seventh chapter clarifying this point. Like, if the Lord is transcendental, how can he become involved in the material creation, right? That's why I was speaking about monism and dualism, because it deals with that. So in verses 3, 7, 3.2 to 376, Vidhura asks three questions that are answered by Maitreya in the following verses. So, okay, so let's see the questions. So, first question. So the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pure, right? He's pure, he's spiritual, and he is unchangeable, right? No change. So being so, how is it possible that he can be how is possible that he can be connected with the three modes of material nature and their activities, right? Get involved in the creation of the universe, in different activities inside the material universes, like and come here in his different incarnations, because people, like normal people, conditioned souls, they get involved in material activities due to desire, right? We want things, desire, attachment. But it's of course not possible that the Lord may have such material desires because he's self-satisfied, he's detached. So why the Lord comes here, right? If he's not attached like us. And the answer of Maitreya comes in verse 9. So he says, quote, certain conditioned souls, they put forward the theory that the Supreme Brahman or the personality of Godhead is overcome by illusion or Maya. At the same time, they maintain that he is unconditioned. This is against our logic, right? These are the words of Vidura. So the point is that Mayavadis and others, they agree, they argue, right, that the Lord falls into Maya when he comes to this material world as an incarnation. But at the same time, they define Brahman as transcendental. And Maitreya argues that this is against our logic, right? There were already similar philosophies to Mayavadi philosophy at the time of Vyasadeva. So it was already discussed at that time. And Maitreya speaks about that. That's against our logic. Doesn't make any sense. So in the first canto, it was already stated that Vyasadeva saw the Lord and the material energy in his meditation, right? And that the material energy was completely under his control. So there is no possibility of the Lord being all overpowered by his own energy. Just like, it's impossible for a person to draw in a cup of water, right? It's just not possible. So the Lord is completely transcendental to the illusory energy in the material creation. So he doesn't desire anything from here. He creates the material manifestation simply to give an opportunity to his parts and parcels to practice devotional service and reattain their eternal spiritual position. So when he comes in his different incarnations, he appears in his eternal spiritual form and he performs his transcendental pastimes. So he doesn't at any time become involved with the illusory energy, right? He's transcendental. And then, second question. So, how can the spirit soul, who is by nature transcendental, right? Full of knowledge and bliss, fall into illusion? How is it possible? Or in other words, how can the pure soul leave the association of Krishna and become a conditioned soul covered by ignorance, right? So, popular question, right? So Maitreya answers these on verses 10 and 11. So he says, the living entity is in distress regarding his self-identity. He has no factual background, right? So like a man who dreams that he sees his head cut off. As the moon reflected on water appears to the seer to tremble due to being associated with the qualities of the water, so the self associated with matter appears to be qualified as matter. So, unquote. So, what does it mean? So, one may dream that he's seeing his head being cut off, right? But this is simply due to his, delirious state, right? This is not real. In reality, this is an impossible situation, right? The eyes, they are situated in the head. So it's impossible for a person to see his own head being cut off. It's just impossible. Similarly, the material sufferings of the soul, they appear only due to ignorance, right? In identification with the body. In reality, these are illusory situations. The soul never dies, but when we identify with material body, then we think that we are dying. The soul is full of knowledge, but by identifying with the body, we identify with the ignorance of the body, and then we forget our transcendental knowledge. The soul is by nature full of bliss, right? But due to the identification with the body, we experience suffering. So in reality, it's only the body that dies, right? But no, only the body that dies, only the body that is in ignorance, and only the body that suffers. But because we identify with the body, we experience all these different things, right? So these things are not experienced by the soul, they are experienced only by the body, but the soul identifies with the body, and therefore the soul also shares this. So later in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find the description of King Puranjana following Queen Puranjani in her activities. And this is an allegory that illustrates this helpless condition of the illusion soul. So I'm going to read this quote. Quote, when the queen drank liquor, King Puranjana also engaged in drinking. When the queen dined, he used to dine with her, and when she chewed, King Puranjana used to chew along with her. When the queen sang, he also sang. Similarly, when the queen cried, he also cried. And when the queen laughed, he also laughed. When the queen talked loosely, he also talked loosely. And when the queen walked, the king walked behind her. When the queen would stand still, the king would also stand still. And when the queen would lie down in bed, he would also follow and lie down with her. When the queen sat, he would also sit. And when the queen heard something, he would follow her to hear the same thing. When the queen saw something, the king would also look at it. When the queen smelled something, the king would follow her to smell the same thing. When the queen touched something, the king would also touch it. And when the dear queen was lamenting, the poor king also had to follow her in lamentation. So, in the same way, when the queen felt enjoyment, he also enjoyed. And when the queen was satisfied, the king also felt satisfaction. So, this is from fourth canto, chapter 25. So, to better explain this point, Maitreya offers the example of the moon being reflected in a pound of water. So, although the moon in the sky is fixed, right, and doesn't tremble, because the water trembles, the reflection of the moon appears to also tremble. So, when the consciousness of the soul is reflected in matter, it appears to assume the qualities of matter, such as ignorance, right? But this association is not factual, it's not like uh, real, like in the full sense. So, in his purport, Prabhupada emphasizes the word pratyayate, which means apparently and not actually, right? Actually, this is from the verse that is not factual. So, like he gives this example that is like the experience of having one's head cut off in a dream. So he mentions that the living entities, they appear to be tainted by material qualities like illusion, lamentation, and miseries, although in the pure soul, these qualities are completely absent, right? So these qualities are not present in the soul. They are present only in the body. But because of illusion, the soul identifies with these qualities that are not, no, his. So when a soul is associated with the modes of passion and ignorance, the quivering of the reflection on the water, right, is more intense, like it shakes more. And when the soul is associated with the mode of goodness, the quivering becomes less, just like the moon reflected in a lake in a day without wind, right? So when the soul finally recovers his transcendental position, then the association with the pound of water completely ceases. And this example also describes the transcendental position of Krishna, who, just like the original moon, never comes in contact with the water, right? So, how can we get rid of this false identification with the body? And this is answered in the next three verses. And of course, the solution is the process of devotional service, right? So Maitreya says, but that misconception of self-identity can be diminished gradually by the mercy of the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, through the process of devotional service to the Lord in the mode of detachment. When the senses are satisfied in the seer supersoul, the personality of Godhead, and merging Him, all miseries are completely vanquished, as after a sound sleep. Simply by chanting and hearing the transcendental name, form, etc., of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one can achieve the cessation of unlimited miserable conditions. Therefore, what we speak of those who have attained attraction for serving the flavor of the dust of the Lord's lotus feet, right? Unquote. So, in his purport, Prabhupada explains that he explains the process of sadhana bhakti and raga bhakti, right, or raganuga bhakti. So the first is the process of practicing devotional service with our present senses under the regulations of the recognized scriptures, right? So this is the process that we have to follow until we become liberated, right? We have to follow like until we go back to Godhead. After liberation, one may start the process of raga bhakti, right? So after one becomes free from the molds of material nature, he can start the process of raga bhakti, in which the mature devotee automatically takes up to the various services of the Lord out of sincere attachment. So at this point, he doesn't need to really try to follow the rules and regulations because one, he doesn't have desire to do anything sinful, and two, he doesn't need to be concerned about like rituals because now he's doing everything out of devotion, so these rituals they become secondary, right? But this is possible only when a person is on this liberated stage, because if one discards the rules and regulations before attaining this stage, then he just goes back to materialistic, sinful activities. And then question number three, Paramatma is always with the soul, right? Always present in the heart and accompanying the soul from one body to the other. So why are the living entities subjected to so many miseries and misfortunes if the Lord is present there as a super soul, right? So the answer to this third question is also in the previous verses. So the point is that although the Lord is present in the hearts of everyone, he doesn't interfere with the material activities of the soul. He acts as a neutral witness. So the Lord is not responsible for the miseries of the soul. He just creates the conditions for the soul to act according to his desires. However, when one desires to become free from material illusion, then the Lord helps in all respects, right? Haribo. So Vidura, he accepted the answers of Maitreya with gratitude, right? And then from verse 21 to the end of the 7th chapter, he poses additional questions. So there are a lot of questions there. So Vidura wants to know about the Manus and their descendants, the different planetary systems, the different classes of living entities, as well as their subdivisions, the nature of the three predominating deities like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, as well as the different incarnations of the Lord. He wants to know about the divisions and orders of human society, the births of great sages, the divisions of the Vedas, and so on. So these questions, they will be answered through the third and fourth cantos, right, all the way to the end of this discussion with Maitreya. And then by the end of the chapter, Sukadeva Goswami, he describes Maitreya preparing to answer all these different questions. So he says, Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, thus the chief of the sages, who was always enthusiastic about describing topics regarding the personality of Godhead, began to narrate the descriptive explanation of the Puranas. Being so infused by Vidura, he was very much enlivened by speaking on the transcendental activities of the Lord. Jai. So this is okay. So this is the end of the 7th chapter. Then we go to chapter 8. The Kumaras meet Lord Sankarsana, right? So Maitreya he reveals to Vidura that a long time ago, Sanat Kumara he had asked similar questions to Lord Sankarsana when he visited him at the bottom of the universe, like accompanied by a group of sages. So Lord Sankarsana he sustains the whole universe, right? And therefore he's situated at the very bottom. So to reach there, the sages they used their mystic powers to transport themselves through the Ganges, right? Because the Ganges it flows from the top of the universe all the way to the bottom. And Prabhupada mentions this process of traveling to a river in his commentary. So he says, quote, the sages came down from Satyaloka by taking advantage of the flowing water, a process of transportation made possible by the power of mystic yoga. If a river flows thousands and thousands of miles, a perfect yogi can at once transport himself from one place to another simply by dipping in its water. The Ganges is the only celestial river which flows throughout the universe, and great sages travel all over the universe via this sacred river, right? So Lord Sankarsana, so that's the end of the quote. So Lord Sankarsana, he's also referred to as Lord Ananta or Sesha. And he's the source of the power that sustains all universes and all planets inside their respective positions. So, what in modern physics is defined as gravity is, according to the Vedas, a display of the potency of Lord Sankarsana, right? Keeping all the planets in their respective orbits. So, it is said that all universes they are resting on the hoods of Sesha, just like small grains of mustard, like in his hands. So this, of course, should not be taken literally in the sense that Sankarsana is like physically holding the universes and planets because he doesn't have a physical body, right? His body is transcendental. He does that through his energy, right? So this example, it just illustrates that the task of holding the universes and maintaining the orbits of the planets and stars is not difficult at all for him. For him, this is very easy, right? He's not like Atlas. He's like holding the planets. No, for him, this is very easy. This is a very simple task. So he can also do it easily while simultaneously describing the glories of the Lord with his unlimited hoods, right? So there is a gigantic form of Sankarsana that sustains all universes on the causal ocean, and there is a partial incarnation inside each particular universe. And this incarnation originates from Lord Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, right? So when in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that I enter into each planet and by my energy they stay in orbit, this refers to his expansion as Lord Ananta or Sankarsana, right? And Prabhupada explains this. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita 5:119 purport. So he says, the Lord of Svetadvipa expands himself as Sheshanaga, who sustains all the planets upon his innumerable hoods. These huge global spheres are compared to grains of mustard resting on the spiritual hoods of Seshanaga. The scientist's law of gravity is a partial explanation of Lord Sankarsana's energy. The name Sankarsana has an etymological relationship with the idea of gravity, right? So it's actually the same thing. It's just that the Vedas, they explain the way it is. That's the energy of Seshanaga. And the scientists, they just reduce it as some kind of unconscious law that appears due to chance. So again, so according to the Vedic cosmology, all the structures of the universe, including not only the planets of our solar system, but also the stars that compose our universe, they have their orbits around Dhruvaloka, just like a gigantic chandelier, right? So it's like rotating like this, and the central point is Dhruvaloka on the top. So modern science also has a similar view, actually. So they believe that the stars, they orbit around the center of the galaxy. So the difference, of course, is that in modern physics, this phenomenon is attributed to an unconscious force, right? Gravity, everything by chance. While the Vedas, they explain that gravity is just one of the features or one of the energies of Lord Sankarsana, right? Haribo. And then the next one. So Lord Sankarsana describes the beginning of the universe to the Kumaras. So again, we go back to Lord Brahma creating the universe. So Maitreya explains that in the distant past, the four Kumaras, they are headed by Sanat Kumara, they met Lord Sankarsana and they heard the meaning of the Srimad Bhagavatam from him. So later, Sanat Kumara transmitted this knowledge to Sankayayana Muni, who later taught Parashara and who in turn spoke it to Maitreya, right? So that's the parampara coming all the way to Maitreya. So this description is similar to the description given by Sukadeva Goswami in the 9th chapter of the second canto, right? Describing the birth of Lord Brahma from the lotus flower, his austerities, his meeting with the Lord, and so on. However, there are a few peculiarities, a few differences between these two descriptions. So the first difference between these two descriptions, right, from second canto, chapter 9, and now third canto, chapter 8. So the first difference between these two descriptions is that the description of chapter 2.9 is a narration by Sukadeva Goswami, right, of course, while chapter 3.8, it repeats the words of Maitreya Muni. So these are two different speakers, right, first of all. And Maitreya Muni, in turn, he describes the conversation between Lord Ananta and the four Kumaras, right, which this offers unique details of the process of creation from the point of view of Lord Brahma. Also, it appears that the description of second canto, chapter 9, it appears that it describes the current day of Brahma, while the description in the third canto, chapter 8, it appears to blend details from the very first day of Brahma and the current day, right? And now we are in the first day of the second half of his life. And this can explain the few apparent contradictions between these two descriptions. Because this type of description that blends details of more than one event or idea is actually quite common in Vedic literature. So, for example, in the fifth canto, for example, there is a description of the universe that simultaneously describes the geography of our planet, the features of Bhumandala, right? Describes the solar system and the abode of the demigods. Everything in one explanation, everything together. So such descriptions, of course, they may be difficult to follow, right? But one may appreciate, how they can bring, lots of details in just a few words. So the description starts at the very beginning of the creation, when Lord Garbhodakashayi Vishnu appeared to be lying down alone in the water of the Garbhodaka ocean. And at this time, he appeared to be sleeping, right? Immersed in his internal potency. In reality, of course, the Lord doesn't need to sleep, but he plays the pastime of sleeping as an excuse to associate with his internal potency, right? When the Lord sleeps, actually he's dreaming with Radharani, right? So that's the purpose of the Lord sleeping. So at that time, like, so this is verse 10 of the 8th chapter. So, quote, at that time, when the three worlds were submerged in water, Garbhodakasai Vishnu was alone, lying on his bedstead. Uh, the great snake Ananta, the great snake Ananta, and although he appeared to be in slumber in his own internal potency, free from the action of the external energy, his eyes were not completely closed. Right? So this describes the Lord before the creation. So the Lord was, however, not alone, right? He was accompanied by all the souls in their subtle bodies, waiting for the creation, and also the material energy in the form of kala, right? Material time. So the Lord is compared to fire within wood, because at that time the Lord was performing no activity, right? So everything was at rest. And then verse 11, quote, just like the strength of fire within fuel wood, the Lord remained within the water of dissolution, submerging all the living entities in their subtle bodies. He lay in the self-invigorated energy called Kala, right? Unquote. So it's mentioned that the Lord remained in this transcendental slumber for 1,000 Jivya Yugas, right? Jivya Yuga is a combination of the four ages, like Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali, which correspond, so 1,000 Jivya Yugas corresponds to 4.32 billion years, same period as the night of Brahma. So in this way, we can understand that the creation of the material elements that are described in chapter 3.5, as well as the Lord entering each universe as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, together with Kali and the souls, it all happened like in a relatively short time after the complete devastation at the end of the previous day of Brahma. So this idea gets additional support when we calculate the total age of the universe in relation to experimental observations, which we'll see in more detail later. For now, we will just concentrate on this description of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and later we will see how this relates to the data and the theories of modern science, right? It's quite interesting, but not for now. This will be for later. So after the Lord entered the universe, he remained in his transcendental slumber for 1,000 Divya Yugas, right? Just like he does every night of Brahma, same period. So during this time, the Jivas, they were resting in his abdomen, together with all material elements, right? So at the end of this period, the Jivas, they again became active, right? Awakened by Kala Shakti, the time energy, just like in the morning, like the sun comes, the cocks start making noise, and everyone starts waking up. So the souls, they started waking up. They desired to continue their material activities. So this aggregate of all the souls made the abdomen of the Lord look bluish, right? A color that symbolizes their ignorance, right? The ignorance of these souls and their desire to be engaged in fruitive activities. So, quote, that's verse 12. The Lord lay down for 1,000 cycles of four yugas in his internal potency, and by his external energy, he appeared to be sleeping within the water. When the living entities were coming out for further development of their fruitive activities, actuated by the energy called Kala Shakti, he saw his transcendental body as bluish, right? So the Lord himself saw the souls wanting to become active. So at this point, the Lord focused his attention on the aggregate of the material elements that are available for the creation of the universe. So this aggregate of material elements, agitated by the mode of passion and combined with the sum total of the fruitive activities of all the souls of the universe, like everything together, it took the form of a lotus flower that appeared from the navel of the Lord. So the Lord then entered this flower as Paramatma, right? And this lotus flower was also impregnated by the three modes of material nature. And then when this lotus flower finally blossomed, then Lord Brahma appeared on top of it, right? Haribol. So, and then this is described on verses 13 to 15, quote, the subtle energy, no, the subtle subject matter of creation on which the Lord's attention was fixed was agitated by the material mode of passion, and thus the subtle form of creation pierced through his abdomen. So, piercing through the sum total of the fruitive activity of the living entities took the shape of the bud of a lotus flower generated from the personality of Vishnu. And by his supreme will, it illuminated everything like the sun and dried up the vast waters of devastation. Unto that universal lotus flower, Lord Vishnu personally entered as the Supersoul, and when it was thus impregnated with all the modes of material nature, the personality of Vedic wisdom, whom we call the self-born, was generated, right? Unquote. So Brahma, he comes directly from Lord Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, like directly from this lotus. Therefore, he's called Aja, or unborn, because he has no material father, right? His father is God, right? His father is transcendental. So in his purports to these verses, Prabhupada mentions, quote, this lotus flower is the universal Virat form, or the gigantic form of the Lord in the material world. It becomes amalgamated in the personality of Godhead Vishnu in his abdomen at the time of dissolution, and it becomes manifested at the time of creation. In other words, just adding some note here. So at the time of dissolution, everything enters the abdomen of Lord Vishnu, amalgamates there, and then at the time of creation, it appears again in the form of this lotus flower. Okay, so back to Prabhupada. So this is due to Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, who enters into each of the universes. In this form, the sum total of all the fruitive activities of the living entities conditioned by material nature, and the first of them, namely Brahma, or the controller of the universe, is generated from this lotus flower. This firstborn living being, unlike all the others, has no material father, and thus is called self-born or Swayambhu. He goes to sleep with Narayana at the time of devastation, and when there is another creation, he is born in this way. From this description, we have the conception of three: the gross Virat form, the subtle Hiranyagarbha, and the material creative force, Brahma. Okay, that's the end of the quote. So, this lotus flower from which Lord Brahma appears is coated by all material elements of the material creation, right? Everything is included there. So it also contains all the fruitive activities of the soul, the material modes, and so on. So everything that will form the material creation is originally part of this lotus, right? So the subtle universal form has the same form as the universe when the universe will be complete. So when the universal form appears, this universal form, it has the same form as the universe, like the complete universe, right? But at first, this is subtle, right? So then the gross manifestation created by Brahma, it just superimposes this subtle manifestation created by the Lord, right? So now the form is already there, but in a subtle form, and then Brahma creates the gross form that like covers it. So because all the material elements that form the planets, they were originally inside this gigantic lotus lotus flower, it is sometimes said that the planets, they reside inside the stem of the lotus, right? But it's not that literally the planets, they are all situated inside the lotus and that we are inside the lotus, literally. It's just that all the material elements that compose all the planets, they were once there, right? In this sense. So Brahma then uses all these elements to create the material universe. And this universe occupies most of the upper parts of the universal globe, right? And that's the part that is not filled with water, right? Because half of the universe is filled with water, the universe occupies the other half, the upper part that is not filled with water. So all these planets and stars, they are divided into 14 planetary systems, right? With Patala situated at the very bottom, close to the Garbhodaka Ocean, and Brahmaloka at the very top, close to the universal coverings. So Brahma creates the universe using the elements supplied by the Lord and using the potency given by the Lord. So the same is valid for us, right? Everything we do consists of manipulating matter using the energy and talents given by the Lord. Therefore, since everything comes from the Lord, everything should be used for Him, right? So just like Brahma is using everything for the Lord, we should also do the same. And then we continue here with the creation. So waking up, right, on top of the lotus, Brahma he could not see anything. He saw just darkness. So verse 16 describes that he looked around to survey the space around him, and in this way he acquired four heads, right? He looked like, and then four heads appeared. And then next verse 17 describes how he could at first not understand the creation, nor the lotus, nor himself, or anything. So in this way, in this process of bewilderment, a whole day of Brahma passed, right? And at the end of this day, the devastation began to move the water and the lotus in great circular waves. That was the end of his first day. And I'm going to read the two verses here. Quote, Brahma, born out of the lotus flower, could not see the world, although he was situated in the row of the lotus. Therefore, he therefore circumambulated all of space, and while moving his eyes in all directions, he achieved four heads in terms of the four directions. Lord Brahma, situated in that lotus, could not perfectly understand the creation, the lotus, or himself. At the end of the millennium, the air of devastation began to move the water and the lotus in great circular waves, right? Unquote. So, you remember that before I said that this explanation of the third canto, it appears to combine details from the first day of Brahma and from the current day, right? On the second half of his life. And this is exactly the part that appears to combine, because these two verses, they appear to describe the very first day of the life of Brahma, right? So when he woke up on top of the lotus for the first time, right? Because the first time, and he looked around, he got his four heads and so on. Why? Because it's described that at the beginning of the life of Brahma, there is a millennium, there is a day of Brahma called Brahma Kalpa. And that's the day when Brahma first appears. And then the second day, the second millennium, is called Padma Kalpa, because on this millennium, the first creation takes place. And this is described on Srimad Bhagavatam 3:11, 35, 36. So the description of Lord Ananta appears to match this description. So since that these two verses describe this first day of Brahma. Okay, so that's just my my thesis here. So next, like still not being able to understand the origin of the lotus or himself, Brahma had the idea of exploring it by going down the stem, right? But at a certain point, he met the Kala chakra of the Lord. Kala, the chakra started attacking him, the time factor, and he became fearful, and he ran back to the top. Right? So later, in verse 31, it is described that the Sudarshana chakra protects Lord Vishnu from all sides, and thanks to her, not even the sun, the moon, the air, fire, etc., they can approach the Lord. So it appears that Sudarshana chakra, moved to prevent Brahma from reaching the Lord by such, unauthorized process. Okay, so Brahma went back to the lotus. So Brahma then, he gave up the idea of understanding his origin by experimental means, and instead he started performing austerities by meditating on the Supreme Lord, right? And this is described here, quote, "Thereafter, being unable to achieve the desired destination, he retired from such searching and came back again to the top of the lotus. Thus, controlling all objectives, he concentrated his mind on the Supreme Lord," right? Unquote. So the process of creation of the universe is very difficult to understand. In his purport to text 17, Prabhupada, he warns that, quote, that's Prabhupada speaking, "No one, therefore, can know the mystery of the creation and cosmic manifestation simply by mental speculation. The human being is so limited in his capacity that without the help of the Supreme Lord, he can hardly understand the mystery of the will of the Lord in terms of creation, continuance, and destruction," like unquote. So, so Prabhupada speaks like that. So how can we understand it then, right? So the answer is given by the example of Lord Brahma. So only by surrendering to the Lord in devotional service can we fully understand this very intricate topic, right? Still, thanks to the commentaries of Srila Prabhupada and due to whatever spiritual practice we may be blessed with doing, we may understand it up to a certain extent, right? We may not understand it fully, but to a certain extent we can understand. So, through his meditation, Brahma was able to develop knowledge, and he was able to see the Lord inside his heart as Paramatma, right? Then, looking outside, he was able to see finally Garbhodakashai Vishnu lying on Lord Sesha on the Garbhodaka ocean, and the whole scene was illuminated by the transcendental light emanating from the jewels that were bedecking the hoods of Lord Sesha, right? Dissipating the darkness of these regions. And so in the beginning, Brahma could not see this transcendental light, right? He was seeing everything dark. He couldn't see it, just like we can see it, right? If you take some telescope, we will not see Lord Ananta anywhere in the universe, right? So in the beginning, all that Brahma saw was darkness. However, after acquiring transcendental vision, then he was able to see everything, right? The Lord Sesha, the light, and so on. So verses 24 and 25, they describe this vision of Brahma. So it says there that the luster of the transcendental body of the Lord mocked the beauty of the coral mountain. The coral mountain is very beautifully dressed by the evening sky, but the yellow dress of the Lord mocked its beauty. There is gold on the summit of the mountain, but the Lord's helmet, bedecked with jewels, mocked it. The mountains, waterfalls, herbs, etc., with a panorama of flowers, sing like garlands, but the Lord's gigantic body and his hands and legs, decorated with jewels, pearls, tulasi leaves, and flower garlands, mocked the scene of the mountain. His transcendental body, unlimited in length and breadth, occupied the three planetary systems, upper, middle, and lower. His body was self-illuminated by unparalleled dress and variegatedness and was properly ornamented, like unquoted. Unquote. So, The Lord showed his lotus feet to Lord Brahma by raising them, right? So Lord Brahma could see the lotus feet of the Lord. And of course, the lotus feet of the Lord, they are the source of all blessings, like giving to devotees who worship the Lord in pure devotional service, right? Simultaneously, the Lord vanquishes the distress of his devotees with his beautiful smile. So in his purport, Srila Prabhupada, he describes that, quote, devotional service to the Lord is very much obliging to him. There are many transcendentalists in different fields of spiritual activities, but devotional service to the Lord is unique. Devotees do not ask anything from the Lord in exchange for their service. Even the most desirable liberation is refused by devotees, although offered by the Lord. Thus, the Lord becomes a kind of debtor to the devotees, and he can only try to repay the devotee's service with his ever enchanting smile. So his smile is the only payment that the Lord can give to his devotees for their service. So the devotees are never satisfied by the smiling face of the Lord, and they become enlivened. And by seeing the devotees so enlivened, the Lord himself is further satisfied. So there is a continuous transcendental competition between the Lord and his devotees, and by such reciprocation of service and acknowledgement, like unquote. So observing the beautiful form of the Lord and his opulences, Brahma concluded that he is the supreme Lord, right? He said, oh, that's the Lord. And at that point, he could see the sting of the lotus flower from where he was born coming out of the navel of the Lord. He could see the devastating waters of the ocean and so on. So everything became visible to Brahma. And Brahma then became surcharged with the mode of passion, and he became inclined to create the universe. And the Lord indicated to Brahma the five causes of creation, which are Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, Prakriti, material nature, Kala, time, the Jivas, living entities, and Karma, their activities. If you're interested in understanding these five in detail, that's in the introduction of the Bhagavad Gita. This is Vedanta philosophy. Whole Vedanta Sutra is about that, and Bhagavad Gita is about that. And in the introduction of the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada explains all of these five in great detail and very clearly. So okay, so seeing these five causes, Brahma began to offer his prayers to the Lord, right, taking shelter of him, and then he started his work of creation, right, Haribol. Then solving apparent contradictions, and that's the difficult part, right? Just to read and repeat, that's okay, but then to really understand what the verses mean and how they fit together, that's a little harder. So okay, first contradiction. Apparent contradiction. So an attentive reader could notice an apparent contradiction between verse 298, where it's mentioned that Brahma meditated for 1,000 years of the demigods, and the Sanskrit is Divyam Sahasrabdam, and then verse 3822, where it's mentioned that Brahma meditated for 100 years, Purusha Yashubi Pavrita Yogena. So, of course, it's common for differences in small details to appear in different narrations of the same pastimes in different Puranas because these are often different descriptions by different personalities, right? They include different accounts of the same pastimes that mention different details or describe them from different perspectives. So this is normal. You see this everywhere in the Puranas. By the description in 298, it's clear that this verse describes the meditation at the beginning of the current day, right? Before having the darshan of the Lord and hearing the four original verses of Srimad Bhagavatam from him, right? That this is clear. But the second verse, 3822, is more difficult to understand because the words Purusha Ayusha can be interpreted as one, a lifetime of a human being, and that's just 100 years or 100 years, that's nothing. Or, on the opposite, it can be interpreted as a lifetime of Brahma, which is, yes, much, much longer, right? So we can see, when we study the purport of this verse, we can see that in both the translation and in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he goes with the second interpretation, that this is a lifetime of Brahma. And then it makes it really hard to understand, right? So in his purport, it's like how Brahma can meditate his whole life, right? So in his purport to verse 3826, Prabhupada, he mentions a verse of the Gopala Upanishad. And this is Purvakanda, verse 17. And this verse appears to be the key to solving the mystery. So the verse says, Brahmano sav anavaratam me jata stuta parardante so pujata gopavesha me purushad avirbhabuva. So in this verse, Lord Brahma, he describes how after constantly meditating and worshiping the Lord, like Brahma no Sav, for the first half of his life, Paradante, he finally realized, like Adbhudyata, the Lord in his original form as a cowherd boy, Gopa Vesha. So, in his commentary on this verse of the Gopala Upanishad, Srila Visvanatha Chakravarti Thakura, he mentions that the personal encounter of Brahma with Krishna happened at the beginning of the Padmakalpa, right? After the first half of the life of Brahma, the current day. So he describes that this encounter happened after the first half of the life of Brahma was complete, right? It means the current day. This is also confirmed by Srila Baladeva Vidyabhushana. He also mentions that after half of his life, the Lord became known to Lord Brahma, leading to this encounter that is described in the second canto, right? So in his purport to 3826, Prabhupada, he concludes that after meditating for many millions of years, Brahma could understand the transcendental form of the Lord as Sri Krishna in the dress of a cowherd boy, and he recorded his experience in the Brahma Samhita, right? So it seems thus that this verse 3822, it just describes this long process of Brahma serving the Lord during the first half of his life, and then finally meeting the Lord in his original form at the beginning of the current day. And so this version, it can reconcile these apparent contradictions, and especially considering that Prabhupada mentions this verse from the Gopala Upanishad, and surely he also saw the commentaries of Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura and Baladeva Vidyabhushana. So Prabhupada had all this information, so it seems probable that that's the conclusion. Because the first half of the life of Brahma, there is a complete destruction after this first half. So it can be said that is a life of Brahma, because his body is annihilated after the period, and then he comes back in the second half, right? That's the current day. So at least that's my thesis. Like I said, if you have a better idea, you can share. Okay, so then second apparent contradiction. One could argue also that the meeting of Brahma with the Lord, described in chapter 3.8, is not the same as Brahma seeing the Lord in his original form in chapter 2.9, right? So one could argue that these are two separate meetings in two separate days. These are not the same day, right? One could argue like this. So could it be that chapter 3.8 describes Brahma meeting the Lord at the beginning of his life, while chapter 2.9 describes another meeting at the current day? Could it be that these are two separate days? There are quite a few arguments against this idea. So first point is that Prabhupada, he doesn't appear to agree with this idea, because he mentions the Gopala Upanishad not just once but twice in his purports to chapter 3.9. So this Upanishad, it directly describes the meeting of Brahma with Krishna, right? So none of his purports in the chapter give the idea that there were two separate meanings. On the opposite, on his purport to verse 44, for example, he mentions that, quote, before his activity in creating the universe, Brahma saw the Lord. That is the explanation of the Chatusloki Bhagavatam. When the creation awaited Brahma's activity, Brahma saw the Lord. This indicates that's the end of the quote. So this indicates that both chapters, they speak about the same meaning. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. It's clear from the commentaries that Prabhupada, he is explaining both as the same meeting, as the same episode. Second argument, B. The prayers of Lord Brahma later in the chapter, they indirectly mention aspects of Krishna's intimate pastimes in Vrindavan uh, that would be not possible for Brahma to know if he hadn't seen the spiritual world. So these prayers, they must have been after after Brahma saw Krishna in his original form. Otherwise, it will not be possible. Then, another argument, verse 3929. So that in this verse, the Lord tells Brahma that what he had asked for had already been granted. Like when Brahma asks to be able to create the universe, the Lord tells Brahma that what he asked for had been already been granted before. So this indicated that this was not the first time that Brahma created the universe. So that's not the first day. That's not the first time. That's the current day. So verses 22 and 43, these two verses, they use the word purva vat and yata purvan, which means as before. And this confirms this, right? Both verses, they use the words that used have the same meaning as before. Then, last point, another argument. Just like the description in chapter 3.8, the description in chapter 2.9 also gives the impression that Brahma met with Lord Narayana. You may say that, oh, this description in chapter 3.8, it doesn't look like Brahma met Krishna. Looks like he met Lord Narayana. But the description in chapter 2.9 also gives the impression that Lord Brahma met Lord Narayana. Krishna is described indirectly in the verses. So it's only due to the explanations of our acharyas as well as the descriptions of other scriptures, like the Brahma Samhita, the Gopala Upanishad, and that's a book where Brahma himself, he describes his experience, like in both, actually. Brahma Samhita and Gopala Upanishad, Brahma himself is speaking. He's describing what he saw. So because of these references that we can understand that on chapter 2.9, Brahma met with Krishna in his original form. So the conclusion is thus that on chapter 3.8, same thing, he met with Krishna, right? So the conclusion is that we should take both chapters as descriptions of the same meaning, as the same meeting, right? Just different stages or from a different perspective or something, but it's the same episode, right? The two chapters speak about the same meeting. Then we go to the third chapter for today, chapter 3.9, Brahma's prayers for creative energy, to receive, to be empowered by the Lord to create the universe. So Brahma starts his prayers to the Lord by stating that after many years of practicing austerities, he finally had the opportunity to directly see him. So the Lord is the true object of knowledge, right? Since there is nothing superior to him, right? So the form of the Lord is completely spiritual, and he's the source of many incarnations. So at first, Brahma tried to understand the Lord by experimental means. But ultimately it was futile, right? Brahma thought himself, quite, physically strong, and he tried to climb down the Lotus, but his physical strength didn't help, right? So only when he adopted the proper process was he able to see the Lord and understand his origin and his purpose, right? So the only way to understand the Lord is by devotional service. And this devotional service starts with Shravanam, right? Hearing about the Lord from devotees. So Lord Brahma also shared his realization in verse 533 of the Brahma Samhita, right? There he says, quote, that's Brahma speaking. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is non-dual and infallible. He is the original cause of all causes, even though he expands in many, many forms. Although he is the oldest personality, he is ever youthful, unaffected by old age. The Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be known by the academic wisdom of the Vedas. One has to approach the devotee of the Lord to understand him, right? That's Brahma himself speaking. So, so Mayavadis, they like to argue that when the Lord comes as an incarnation, he assumes a material form, and therefore they argue that the form that Lord Brahma saw was a representation of the three modes of nature, right? It was a material form that, Brahman assumed. But Brahma counters this argument by seeing that the form he is seeing is eternally freed from material contamination. It's there on the Sanskrit directly. Avabodha Rasodayena Saswan Nivrita Tamasa. So in other words, Brahma, who is the most qualified person in the universe, who had the direct experience, right, who was there, he concluded that the Lord has a form, and this form is not only eternal, but completely spiritual, right? He does. So there is just no space to argue on this point. Right? Brahma was there. He's the most intelligent person, and he understood in this way. How someone, from Kali Yuga with imperfect intelligence, imperfect senses, imperfect everything, can think that he knows better, right? It's that's ludicrous, right? So no discussion here. So okay, so then Brahma, he in his prayers, he describes the position of the materialist. So, unfortunately, many are more attached to, many are not attached, right, to the devotional service of the Lord. They're attached to matter, right? They are not interested in hearing about the Lord's form and pastimes. And these people, they live in constant anxiety under the material modes, right? So Brahma speaks about them. Oh my lords, the people of the world are embarrassed by all material anxieties. They are always afraid. They always try to protect wealth, body, and friends. They are filled with lamentation and unlawful desires and paraphernalia, and they avariciously base their undertakings on the perishable conceptions of my and mine. As long as they do not take shelter of your safe lotus feet, they are full of such anxieties, like unquote. So it's true that people living the material platform, they can enjoy using their material sense, right? Okay. But Brahma argues that the happiness derived from the senses is very small and goes away very, very fast. So the words he uses are kama, sukha, lesha, lavaya. Lesha means brief, and lavaya means just for a moment. Right? So he uses two words that mean more or less the same thing to emphasize this point. That is very quick, it's very uh, illusory. So in search for this very brief material happiness, the souls living in the material world, they suffer from many material miseries like hunger, thirst, heat, cold, rain, diseases, and they are also overwhelmed by sexual urges and anger. And so, despite all these miseries, however, conditioned souls, they work very hard in the material world, trying to satisfy their material desires to the point of not being able to sleep at night, right? So sad, right? So, however, as a remuneration for their, efforts, right, for working so hard, they just get a continuation of the process of birth and death, right, together with the results of their sinful activities. So, it's such a terrible situation, right? So Brahma concludes by saying that, quote, I take pity on them, and I am very much aggrieved for them, right? Unquote. So this illustrates the position of a devotee of the Lord, right? Who has compassion and works tirelessly for the spiritual elevation of the people, right? So in verse 9, he shares his realization about the nature of these material miseries and how to become free from them. So Brahma says, quote, "O my Lord, the material miseries are without factual existence for the soul. Yet, as long as the conditioned soul sees the body as meant for sense enjoyment, he cannot get out of the entanglement of material miseries, being influenced by your external energy," right? So this is Bhagavatam 399. So as we already studied, the material creation is just a permutation of one of the energies of Krishna, which is originally spiritual. So pure devotees, they can live in the material world without being affected by illusion because they see everything in connection with Krishna. So the material experience starts when we see things as separated from Krishna, right? As objects meant for our enjoyment, right? That's when Maya starts. The opposite path starts when we use the same objects in Krishna service, right? And that's what he explains in the Bhagavad Gita, right? And then next slide, that's already like that's just one, and this and one more. So then that's the position of devotees, right? So he spoke about the position of the materialists, now the position of devotees. So starting from verse 11, Brahma speaks about the other side, right? About the position of the devotees of the Lord who are interested in hearing about Krishna and thus have their hearts purified to the extent that the Lord personally takes a seat there, illuminating the devotee with devotion and spiritual realization, right? Jai. So the Lord has unlimited forms and they are equally powerful, but he agrees to manifest to the devotee in the particular form that he is attracted to, right? So the form that the devotee is attracted, the Lord appear. So in other words, the Lord reciprocates the service of the devotee not out of obligation, but out of love, right? So why does the devotee become attracted to a particular form of the Lord? So is there any particular reason, or is just like by chance, right? So Prabhupada explains this point. Oh, and this you pay attention. That's a really interesting purport. That's purport for 3911. So quote, and let's pay attention. This is a very interesting purport. So, quote, this attachment of the devotee to a particular form of the Lord is due to natural inclination. That's not by chance, that's natural inclination. Each and every living entity is originally attached to a particular type of transcendental service because he is eternally the servitor of the Lord. Lord Chaitanya says that the living entity is eternally a servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Therefore, every living entity has a particular type of service, has a particular type of service relationship with the Lord eternally. This particular attachment is invoked by practice of regulative devotional service to the Lord. And thus the devotee becomes attached to the eternal form of the Lord, exactly like one who is already eternally attached. This attachment for a particular form of the Lord is called Swarupa Siddhi. And then there is another. So this is the quote from Prabhupada. And then there is another verse here that I'm going to quote. That's the verse from Bhagavatam. Quote, "O my Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears by the process of bona fide hearing, and thus their hearts become cleansed, and you take your seat there. You are so merciful to your devotees that you manifest yourself in the particular eternal form of transcendence in which they always think of you." So, interesting purport, right? And the verse also. So the Lord is the well-wisher of everyone and is actually in the hearts of all as Paramatma. However, he is unavailable for non-devotees. Non-devotees, they can't see the Lord, although the Lord is there. So, although residing in their hearts, the Lord is invisible and unavailable for them. So, when Brahma says that the Lord takes a seat in the heart of his pure devotees, he is speaking about the direct presence of the Lord that can be perceived by the devotee, right? And the Lord also reciprocates with the prayers of the demigods and others who approach him with material desires. But he's not very satisfied with them. The reason is that the Lord doesn't want any of his sons, right, the living entities, to remain in the material world suffering from the threefold miseries, right? He wants everyone to go back to Godhead. But this is possible only when one comes to a platform of pure devotional service. Still, Brahma concludes, he says that anything that is done from the Lord, for the Lord, such as the performance of Vedic rituals, charities, austerities, offering of the results of one's work, and so on, is also beneficial because such acts of religion, they never go in vain, like helping one to gradually come to the platform of pure devotion. So, what are the symptoms of these pure devotees? So, this Prabhupada explains on the next verse, purport for the next verse. He says, quote, "Pure devotees are not desirous of any material enjoyment, nor are they averse to it. They completely dovetail their desires with the desires of the Lord and perform nothing on their personal account. Arjuna is a good example. On his own sentiment, due to family affection, Arjuna did not want to fight. But finally, after hearing Srimad Bhagavad Gita, he agreed to fight in the interests of the Lord. Therefore, the Lord is very much satisfied with pure devotees because they do not act for sense gratification, but only in terms of the Lord's desire." Haribol. Now, finally, Brahma is empowered to recreate the universe, right? Recreate because that's not the first time. That's already the second half of his life. He did it many times. So, Lord Brahma concludes his prayers by offering obeisances to the Lord, and then he requests the Lord to empower him to again create the universe the way it was before the devastation. So, before the appearance of Brahma, all the material elements that form the planets, they were resting on inside the abdomen of the Lord, right? Together with all souls. Now, these elements, they are grouped around the lotus flower. Everything is there. And this lotus flower contains all the ingredients, right? And the service of Brahma is to rearrange all of this into the material creation, right? So Brahma says, "O object of my worship, I am born from the house of your lotus navel for the purpose of creating the universe by your mercy. All these planets of the universe were stationed within your transcendental abdomen, like you were enjoying while you were enjoying sleep. Now, your sleep having ended, your eyes are open like blossoming lotuses in the morning," right? That's Bhagavatam 3:9-21. So, as we can see, the material elements are never transformed, but they are just permutated or reorganized into different forms. So everything starts with the spiritual energy of the Lord, right? His external potency, which is combined with another spiritual potency, time. And this results in the Mahatattva. And then by combining and recombining the different ingredients that compose it, the Lord creates the material elements, and these are in turn used by Brahma to create the material manifestation, which is then joined by the innumerable souls, right? Then, at the time of devastation, everything is again disassembled, right? And the energy returns to the Lord. So what makes it difficult for us to properly understand the Lord, you know, his pastimes and his different energies and even the material creation is the fact that we tend to consider everything in material terms. And thus we impose or false conceptions into all these topics, right? That's why it becomes hard to understand. And Prabhupada makes this point in his purport. He says, quote, "Impersonalists always think backwards. They think that because there is form in matter, spirit should be formless. Because in matter there is sleep, in spirit there cannot be sleep. And because the sleeping of the deity is accepted in Archana worship, the Archana is Maya." Mayavadis, they misunderstand everything. So all these thoughts are basically material. So, because of our material conceptions, we tend to think that the Lord is formless and impersonal, that spiritual existence is without activities, and so on, right? This is fruit of material concepts. And under the same material concepts, we tend to think that we are eternally conditioned in this material world, that we don't have an eternal relationship with Krishna, and so on. The root cause of these misconceptions is the same. It comes from the same place from where comes the misconceptions of the Mayavadi, right? You see, it comes from these material conceptions. And now the last points for today. Last slide. So Brahma mentions that the Lord is the friend and soul of all living entities in the world, right? And he maintains all for their ultimate happiness. So there is an eternal, natural affection between the Lord and his parts and parcels. And therefore, the Lord wants all of us to return to our eternal position, understanding that this is the only thing that can bring us ultimate happiness. And for this reason, the Lord empowers Brahma, right? So the universe can be created, giving another opportunity for all of us to remember our eternal relationship with the Lord. So, understanding all of this, Brahma is prepared to be engaged in his work of creation, right? He's ready. But he prays to the Lord that he may not be materially affected by this work, right? That he may be able to give up the false prestige of being the creator. And this is also an example to all of us because while living this material world, we get involved in different activities, right? That may make us forget the Lord. So the only protection against that is to constantly pray to the Lord, right? And invoke his protection, right? That's the uh, solution, right? And Prabhupada makes this point in his purport. He says, quote, Brahma wants to be protected by the Lord because he has Brahma wants to be protected by the Lord because he has to contact many, many vicious living entities. An ordinary Brahmana may fall from the Brahma stages or the power of Brahminical excellence due to his association with many fallen conditioned souls. Brahma, as the supermost Brahmana, is afraid of such a fall down, and therefore he prays to the Lord for protection. This is a warning for one and all in the spiritual advancement of life. Unless one is sufficiently protected by the Lord, he may fall down from his spiritual position. Therefore, one has to pray constantly to the Lord for protection and the blessing to carry out one's duty. Lord Chaitanya also entrusted his missionary work to his devotees and assured them of his protection against the onslaught of material affection. Right? That's Prabhupada's purport. So just concluding. So the Lord accepted the prayers of Brahma, right? And he revealed that what he was asking, what Brahma was asking, had already been granted before. In other words, in each of his days, the Lord empowers Brahma to create the universe, right? So without this empowerment, the creation will not be possible. So similarly, we are empowered by the Lord to perform different activities and play different roles. But we should always remember that this all comes from the Lord, right? So Prabhupada mentions this point. He says that, quote, one should not be puffed up because he's entrusted with certain executive work. Fortunately, Fortunate is he who is so entrusted, and if he is always fixed in the sense of being subordinate to the will of the Supreme, he is sure to come out successful in the discharge of his work. Right? Unquote. So the Lord blessed Brahma to perform the work of creation, right? Seeing everything in connection with him. And ultimately, as the fruit of this realization, for Brahma to become self-realized and return back home, back to Godhead, right? So this is the Lord speaking, quote, "O Brahma, when you are absorbed in devotional service in the course of your creative activities, you will see me in you and throughout the universe, and you will see that you yourself, the universe, and the living entities are all in me. You will see me in all living entities as well as all over the universe, just as fire is situated in wood. Only in that state of transcendental vision you will be able to be free from all kinds of illusion. When you are free from the conception of gross and subtle bodies, and when your senses are free from all influences of the modes of material nature, you will realize that you will realize your pure form in my association. At that time, you will be situated in pure consciousness." Right? Unquote. And then the Lord also gave a benediction. Lord gave a benediction to us also. He said that any human being who prays like Brahma and who thus worships me shall very soon be blessed with the fulfillment of all his desires, for I am the Lord of all benediction. Jai. So, in his purport, Prabhupada adds that the prayers offered by Brahma cannot be chanted by anyone who desires to fulfill his own sense gratification. Such prayers can be selected only by a person who wants to satisfy the Lord in his service. Jai. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. So this is all for today. Hare Krishna.